Coming up on Theatre Talk.
But reviews are written as an apparently objective or a authoritarian view of it, and I don't know what the person's agenda is.
Right.
Probably one of the main agendas for the person is to write something that's snappy and snazzy enough that they keep their job at the New York Post.
Is that possible?
Let's confess it's true.
Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
And all them sorry cunts on the new estate. Rooster Johnny Byron ain't going nowhere. So a happy St. George's Day. Now kiss my beggar ass, you Puritans.
From New York City, this is Theatre Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, the play Jerusalem has just opened to fabulous notices, which are certainly richly deserved.
Yes, the word masterpiece gets thrown around a lot, but I think in the case of Jerusalem, it is appropriate. The play began in London, where I saw it last year. Terrific reviews there. It has now come to New York, where it has just opened to another packet of rave reviews. It's a fascinating play about, shall we say, an eccentric individualist who goes his own way no matter what happens in society. It was written by Jez Butterworth, who joins us here tonight on Theatre Talk. Jez, welcome to our show, and congratulations on the success of Jerusalem. And giving a colossally brilliant performance, as he always does in everything I've seen him in, is the great British actor Mark Rylance, who's coming to Theatre Talk for the first time. Congratulations on your success as well, and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Before we start talking about the play, Mark, I have to ask you, I've seen 4 or 5 of your performances. I've read a whole bunch of reviews. I have never read a bad review for Mark Rylance. Are you an actor who just gets great reviews all the time?
I don't read them, so I don't know.
They're all terrible.
I think when
You couldn't show your head. And
You don't. You don't want to know. You don't want to look at any of them, huh?
No, no. I don't even read interviews I give now anymore.
Really? Why is that?
I don't know. I find it confusing, distracting.
Makes you self-conscious about the performance, perhaps, if someone describes it in a certain way?
The reviews, the reviews, you know, I don't, it's not that I hate that business. It's a separate complementary business, and it's good to have people talking about the shows and discussing it. That's great. But they're not, yeah, they make you self-conscious, and I suppose they're to do with an event that happened the night that reviewer came.
All right.
But for me, the crucial thing is to be present each evening, and reading a review can put a kind of cling film between you and the audience, I find, of you having a impression of something that really happened a few weeks ago or a few nights ago.
Yeah.
I can see the use of them. I can see the purpose of them in marketing a play. But for me, it's a question of, like, would you listen at that door where those people are talking about you behind it? That's what it feels like, because you will learn something perhaps, but perhaps you'll learn something you don't want to know, and maybe it will alter your behaviour in a way that won't feel natural.
You know, I mean, I like to talk to people. If I met a reviewer and they wanted to talk to, or she wanted to talk about the play, that's great.
You would
I'll talk to anyone about it, because then I can see in their eyes what type of person they are,
Right.
whether they have, and whether what personally they're taking as their personal connection to the play. But reviews are written as an apparently objective or authoritarian view of it, and I don't know what the person's agenda is.
Right.
Probably one of the main agendas for the person is to write something that's snappy and snazzy enough that they keep their job at the New York Post.
Is that possible?
Let's confess it's true.
And great that they should. Great that there should be great writing out there that's matching and stirring debate about things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a separate job to my job.
I had a moment this morning because I was coming out of the shower and I hadn't read any of the reviews, and Jilly, my wife, was just on the internet and she cracked up laughing, and she read me one line which said, it was the final line of something, and it said, "Anybody who says they enjoyed Jerusalem is lying." I Just thought fantastic.
I didn't come across that review. Good for you.
Check it out.
And what a fabulous wife you have to read you that line in the morning,
Yeah,
too. Great. All right, well, let's talk about this terrific play, which I did enjoy, and I am not lying. Jerusalem. Jez, for people who have not seen the play, can you just give us a brief summary of what it's about and what the inspiration for it was? What was the trigger in your mind to write this character, this play?
Sure, the play takes place outside a village in Wiltshire, which is about 70 miles to the west of London. And it takes place in a wood, which is being illegally occupied by a character Mark plays, Johnny Byron. He's been there for nearly 30 years, I think, and he's managed to repel all attempts to jettison him. And the action begins on the morning of a country fair that's taking place in the village, and also on the morning where he is going to be finally evicted by local authorities. All warnings of which he's ignored up until now.
What was the trigger for this play? What was on your mind when you started writing it?
I don't really know. I think that when you begin, when you get a sense that you're starting a play, or when I'm starting a play, I get a lot of chills, a lot of sort of goosebumps around certain ideas that I'll start to include, and I'll include the ones that give you goosebumps, and I'll leave out the ones that don't, and you suddenly end up with a form or a place where you wish to play, and so much of that was provoked certainly in its present form, from meeting Mark and Ian and Mark and I talking, and finding that we were all really, really excited about the same kind of ideas.
Oh, you
And
hadn't
really
written it
wanted to
yet?
try this.
So did you tailor it for Mark?
I had written a version of a play,
Yeah.
let's say. I would contest that it was a play, but Mark saw something in it, and Ian saw something in it that I couldn't see, namely, I think, an essence in the character. I mean, I'll be speaking for you now, but like there was something there that I think you wanted to delve into and to bring out.
What was that, Mark, when you read this first early draft of the play?
Just the relationship of teenagers to adults who are on the outside of the community of society, who are doing something that's on the edge, and therefore they're creating a space where the parents or the society, the trees that are dominating the little tree's life isn't growing. So that need to go out and have some kind of mortal risk, some kind of Jimmy Dean racing to the cliff experience, which particularly young men, I think, need, and unfortunately sometimes go off to war to get. But in a lot of rural, and if you go even further back to indigenous societies, there are specific rituals of initiation for young people to help them to become aware of what their particular diamond in their character is. And if I take a positive look at Byron, I think that's he's like an initiator. He loves that moment when a young person flowers or becomes themselves for a bit.
But to take a less than positive look, he's also the town drug dealer.
He is,
Yes,
and drugs have been a
and
part
that's
of
the part,
initiation.
yes.
I mean, that's one reason the
time.
kids flock to him. I mean, we should say for people who haven't seen the play that he lives there in the woods, and these kids from the town keep coming to him because it's fun to hang out with him.
And you can be sure some of the kids who are not allowed to go hang out with him are sitting on Prozac back in the
And
There are other drug dealers in town as well.
Can you also make the case, though, while he's a hero, an anti-hero, perhaps these kids, he also is a kid himself. I mean, he's somebody who has chosen, in a way, not to grow up and never to become part of an adult society.
Yes, that's the deepest level of the play, is that desire we have at times to stay when we know we have to go, or the desire to go when we know we have to stay, and that's such a deep part for all the characters in the play. But definitely, he's having trouble admitting that his lifestyle is not sustainable.
Mark touched upon it there, but this thing of him wishing to remain at a point where he has to move on to another state is, I think, where the play lives. And I think that I got a letter when we were on at the Royal Court in London from I think it was from a Spanish woman who said that, and she was describing something towards the end of the play, which without giving it away. She said that the last time that she was naked covered in blood with a drum beating in her ears, waiting to meet giants was when she was born.
That's a good one.
And of course, that was never my conscious intention in writing it, but you have someone moving from one state to another at that point, which I think you feel very, very profoundly, or she did.
There have been comparisons made with your character and Falstaff. And then someone made a wonderful point to me that it was like a degenerate Oberon, that he was the king of the fairies in the woods. In the woods. Were you influenced by these Shakespearean?
I think my models were mostly from life, and if they then correspond to literary models, that's sort of by accident. I don't think there was any literary work that I looked at and said, I want to take a piece of this and put it here.
But you're full of that. You've drunk so much of that literary work.
I have,
It's kind of unconscious.
It is unconscious, I think. And I think I very much just like the idea of seeing a play set outside. I mean, you just don't get that very often.
And in front of a cool trailer.
Yeah, that
with chickens.
I think one of the first things I get excited about is the setting. You know, you just feel like you could live in it. You feel like you can move all around it in your head, and yet you're fully aware that it's taking place in a theatre. So you're aware of this wonderful setting that feels real, but also an audience watching.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah. You talk about this real guy that you went and visited, Mickey Lay in Pusey.
Yeah, well, Mickey Doo is his nickname.
Mickey Doo.
It's based. Your character is based on someone that you met.
My character is based on a few people I know. Some I knew when I was a kid. But yes, most directly on this character that Jez, who lived in the town that Jez lived in when he was writing Mojo 10 or 12 years ago, a little town in Wiltshire. And Jez pointed him out to me. You, at the time, 2 years ago, you didn't think he was still alive.
No.
I thought he might not be there. So, but I went down with my wife and was gradually told by people with certain kind of warnings, oh, be careful. But that's where he lives, at the end of this little street. And I went round and...
And what was the meeting like? Could you knock on the door and say, I'm a world-famous actor, Mark Rylance, and I'm going to be playing you in the West End?
I knocked on the door and I said, I'm a friend of Jez Butterworth's, who lived here 10 years ago, and he's written a play, and it, has some things to do with the time he spent with you, and I wondered if I could have a little time with you, and he basically told me to off.
So that was
what
it.
your character would
Yeah, he came to the door all dark, and on a Sunday morning, off, close the door. And then I thought, you don't go to the Dragon without a present. And so I went back 2 weeks later with a nice bottle of Jameson's whiskey.
Clever man.
Said, oh, please come in. I was stoned. He said, I didn't know what I was doing. Come in. And there was a 17-year-old girl there called Freya, the goddess of eternal youth, sitting having her 17th birthday in his wonderful little house with the candles lit and a couple other teenage boys all smoking joints and sitting around with him. And he sat and had me there for 3 hours, told me all about all kinds of things. So many of them were so synchronistic with what Jez had imagined, which was an extraordinary thing. And then we've been down again lately. Just before this revival, we took the American actors who joined us for this revival down.
To meet this guy.
Yeah, meet all the people in Pusey, and they all came out. We're like their local football team.
Has this guy, what's his name?
Mickey Lay.
Has he seen the play?
Yes, he has seen it.
What was his reaction to see the character modeled on?
I wasn't there that night. I mean,
He was too frightened.
The thing is it's very odd because to say that it's modelled on him, I probably must have spent 6 nights in the pub with Mickey over the course of a year, 15 years ago, and I wouldn't ever suggest that I knew him or that I'd studied him. There was just something. There's just these characters. You see them. There's about half a dozen of them in my life that I can imagine. There's these people that you meet who you can see from space are dangerous, and and I don't know. I just pick up on it straight away, and I'm drawn to them.
I'm sure for both of us, there's lots of different conglomerate people you use when you're creating a part. Yeah.
And similarly, when audiences come to see it, they often comment to me, audience members, that they know people like this, that they grew up, that there was someone in the village where they grew up who fulfilled this role, this kind of, what happens to kids between the ages of, when they're off the monkey bars and before they go to universities.
And when they've turned on their parents and can't stand to be in the house and want to get away.
Oh, absolutely.
For probably, for either really legitimate reasons or just because that's how you wish to be when you're that age. And I think that we were drawn to those types of characters. It's just, it's just that how you fill that liminal period. You end up as an outsider age 15, I think.
Before we go, we want to talk about the meaning of Jerusalem, which you've drawn from a Blake poem. No, I won't recite, but
don't recite Blake, please.
But you say,
No, you're right.
nor shall my sword sleep in my hand till we have built Jerusalem. What is the significance of Jerusalem to the British that you picked this?
Well, Blake was writing at the time of the Industrial Revolution, and the other line in there is these dark satanic mills. And he's very horrified by what's being done to the people and to the culture and the countryside by the business, the kind of emerging corporate and industrial agenda of labor and work. And the coalition of the government with those forces. So the poem, in my mind, is a question. The song is now a song, but a question about what's the real purpose of this land. What does the land call and offer to any living being that lives on this little island of England? Did it draw, this great master teacher, Jesus Christ, to walk here on this land at one time? Was this a Jerusalem? I mean, I always take Jerusalem in Blake's terms as meaning more a place where people live in the center of their heart or have some kind of fullness or wholeness to them, and that he's challenging the new agenda, which is being born in a very horrific way, with pollution and with child labor and all the excesses of early industrialization.
And
So in Rooster's the deep life that's avoiding that.
Well, Rooster's pretty damaged, as we've talked about.
Yes, yes.
I'm not sure that Rooster himself incarnates it. It's very, but the question of what's being done to the English countryside at the moment is very, very predominant in society over there. The culture is being very, very, very firmly destroyed. The culture of
And
common
it's happening
culture.
here too.
well, I just want
It's happened here, I think, already. in a lot of
I
places.
just wanted to say, Jez, that I remember listening to the BBC only a couple of weeks ago, and there was this big issue about selling off forests in
That's
England.
right. Yeah.
And there was a big revolt against that.
That's
and that
right.
touches on this play. I mean, who does this forest really belong to?
Very much
Exactly,
so,
yeah.
very much so. Just to speak to the idea of the title of the play, I think I was drawn to the amount of questions in that poem. It's sort of, and did those feet in ancient time. The whole thing is like asking questions and questions and questions. And I think that I would like an audience that comes to this to not feel that there is any kind of like allegorical puzzle that they have to solve or information that they need about Britishness or Englishness that they need to bring to this. Because actually, I didn't put it together like that. I didn't study to do this play, and it's not as if it's like a crossword puzzle that you need to solve. It's just full of, as I said, moments that I found physically chilling and exciting that I put together in such a form whereby they kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, if that corresponds to some kind of underlying myth, that's completely by chance.
Or literary references
That's
that you knew that came.
It's completely by chance.
It's not like
Well
he's a
said.
wonderful, but it's not like Tom Stoppard, who is deliberately, referencing poems and art and all
Right.
this.
It's not doing that at any point, I don't think.
Right,
And so, it is just the only way I know how to write plays is like that. Is just to put the next thing forward that feels more exciting than the last moment.
we just have a few minutes left, but I just want to broaden it out a little bit, because when I was in England and read the reviews for the play, a lot of them said this is the play that speaks to the current economic situation of Britain at the time. In other words, you've written about people, working class people, lower middle class people, for whom most opportunities have been closed off. A lot of them, if they'll wind up staying in this town, will stay there because they cannot get a great education. There will be no opportunities for them. Is that an issue you feel that your country is struggling with now, that England is struggling with now?
Well, it was never my intention to write something about the state of the nation. I don't really know what the state of the nation is, and I'm not being coy. I think that if you're going to choose a setting which is which is eccentric, which is on the fringes of an established society, you're going to naturally be drawn to the characters that would end up there in real life, and so that those issues are going to be drawn into it. I don't have any axe to grind or beef about England in that kind of a way that I would bring to the stage. My own feelings about it, you know, I don't want to write political things. If I'm drawn to a political subject, I did a screenplay for Fair Game, the Sean Penn, Naomi Watts movie. I wasn't drawn to that for political reasons either. I was drawn to it because I couldn't take my eyes off the characterizations and the people who I met. It was exciting to me.
What about this larger issue, Mark, of this play? As I said, many critics in England said that this is the play that is an indictment of the culture and society that we have created in England now.
Well, I think it's great that people make of a play what they want to make of it, that they pay the money and that there's lots of things to be made of it. And I really respect Jez's approach, that he's made a story unconsciously, which in this case has really touched something. It's funny that the word economic comes up in your description of that they would try and describe it in economic terms. And I think, I feel that just the stories that are being fed us, the stories of what will make us happy, of what are the important issues that we should be focusing on, you know, as a society, to paying our economic debts and all this stuff, it is just has created a desert in people's souls. Yeah. And the necessary things of life are necessary, but they are not what they're not, I don't believe, why we're here from birth to death. We need something larger, we need larger stories, mythological stories that touch upon the soul's need for experience in life, something deeper, something more mysterious.
Than an austerity program.
I think
the government and the business world don't want us to think those things, because then I don't think we'll work so hard, because we'll see that where does work end you? Where, you know, no one dies thinking I should have spent more days in the office.
But I completely agree with that. I think if we're dealing with a present crisis with this play, the present crisis we're dealing with began 300-400 years ago, when science took over from any kind of sort of ritualized religion in our lives to explain what it is that we're doing here, and was supposed to provide us entirely with our sense of meaning.
And in fact took away our sense of mystery.
I think so,
belief.
because, you know, I think that you know, if you just have the idea of logos dominating the space that's been put in our beings for the soul, for the spirit, for something that you know, we're going to need to answer questions that can't be answered by how much something weighs, or, you know, why empirically it's there.
And we're not talking about organized religion versus science. We're talking about more the psyche and just the need for the need to encounter the major things that happen in your life, of births and deaths and loves and griefs and joys, and these things, I think, the young people are always very healthily searching for, before they get swallowed up. But the pressure on them now to be swallowed up quickly and become what's the word, useful, or practically a part.
Productive members of the society.
Yeah.
Or affluent.
But just because we have to wrap it up, but just to bring it back, I guess you could say that Rooster, this character in the play, is such an individualist, a rabid individualist, because he is in touch with those ancient, those darker, those more mysterious forces. And if you lose touch with that, that's when you can lose your individuality.
I think those old stories are hard to conform. They're hard to make conform. I think if you keep in contact with the history and the older mythological stories, they're not productive, they're not functional, they're not going to get you a job, you know, at Walgreens, but they keep the road curvy and spirally, rather than all this thing to make the road as straight as possible from A to B.
That's exactly
That's a quick journey, but it's a terribly boring journey, and you will be very sad when you die.
To encapsulate that, you know, before we learned how to farm, we were hunters, and there were those that knew how to hunt, who could tell you, you know, where to wait for the buffalo, and there were those who, after you've killed the buffalo, and one or two of you possibly died in killing the buffalo, and you all sat round covered in its blood, having eaten it, what happens next? And you need someone to explain what has gone on. So you start to tell stories about it.
In this play, you also see mythological forces giants and mystical things. You see Mark Rylance consume frightening substances that you can't believe he's doing. You see this amazing, crazy rave party, and you see live chickens. It's
We'll be
not
playing
to
in
be
the
missed.
Barnum and Bailey three-ring circus.
This is not a play that travels any kind of straight path.
Don't wanna miss it.
Curves and winds and hills and valleys and the whole thing.
Got a proper dragon in it.
A proper dragon.
Well, it's a rich, meaty, fascinating, funny play, at the center of which is a colossally good performance by Mark Rylance. The play is Jerusalem. It is at the Music Box Theater by Jez Butterworth and starring Mark Rylance. Thanks a lot for coming on Theater Talk Time.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Fun, thank you.
Now, first of all, babies don't have teeth.
All Byron boys are born with their own teeth. 32 jumpers, hair in them's chest, no weeping, no wailing, talking straight off. This one, me, he sits up, wipes the dew from his eyes and calls, "Mother, what is this dark place?" And she replied, "'Tis England, my boy, England." And with that, I hops off the bed, out the door, and off I marches in my little black cloak.
Where did that come from?
What?
The cloak. Where did the cloak come from?
All Byron boys are born with their own clothes.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.